All right, thanks everyone for being here. As Andres said, I've met some incredible people, some incredible design leaders, politicians, people that you would just be like really jealous to meet, but there's been one that marked me like no one else. This guy. So when I was 7 years old, I went to Disney World and I met Mickey Mouse. And it was amazing. Like, I was incredibly happy. Or maybe I was 10. I was incredibly happy. And, you know, this really represented a lot of what I was infatuated by at the time. And the interesting thing is, like, when I was a kid, you know, everything that was around Disney was something that I was a fan of. Then, as I grew up, I continued kind of this being so touched by the culture that happened in America, right? So I listened to music that was from there. I was, you know, watching shows that was from there, consuming products, watching movies that were from there. And this completely, I think we can all relate to this. And I'm particularly from South America. I'm Argentinian originally. So over there, all of this.
Sorry.
All good. Over there, all the things that, you know, I wanted to own seemed like they were kind of made there. And as I continued through my life and I moved to Europe and I started working as a designer, this continued through my work, right? Like, a lot of the things that you see here are screenshots from, you know, those first years that I was working as a UX designer. And the reality is, like, even in European companies, we were just looking at what was doing in Silicon Valley and just being like, this is good design, this is kind of how it should look like. If you work in a company that does ride hailing, it should look like Uber because that's a standard and that's kind of how design should be, right? So during those years, what we know about digital startups was fully created in Silicon Valley, and basically living in Europe and working in tech sometimes felt like a little brother who was trying to copy the older brother. Digital products and innovation were impossible to match. We didn't have the same possibilities and the same resources. And I'd like to quickly kind of expose what this was, right? There were basically three things that I think that made that Europe couldn't compete for many decades with things like the United States. The first one was funding, right? Big capital in the US. The second one is infrastructure, because American platforms own the stack. And the third one was talent. Let's go through which. So regarding, you know, money, we can look here as a graph that's showing how much VC investment is done in Europe compared to the US. And even to 2022, the difference is massive, right? This is by GDP. So obviously, how do you compete with that? The second thing is infrastructure. All the companies that provide the internet are based in America or are from American owners, right? So, you know, the internet runs on this on these services, and Europe really could not compete. The talents, right? As a designer in 2014, my dream was to work at like Airbnb or Google or Figma or, you know, any of these companies. And I think for some maybe it still is, but that's changed a little bit. But we'll talk about that a bit later. But basically, this made that the talent really was looking to come into one of these companies. And guess what? It was unlikely that you would have an impactful product team working at any of these companies in European zone. But suddenly things started shifting, right? I remember reading this tweet a few years ago and being kind of disgusted. So Naval is someone who's, you know, I consider a thought leader, someone super interesting, and his book and his tweets always were interested. But there was something shifting in the culture that really made me think, like, why is this okay? Why can't we just accept that someone like him can say something like this? And of course, with the second Trump presidency, that only seemed to accelerate. What was one a political ally of Europe seemed to turn against it, and this was a big wake-up call. And the irony is that it wasn't the tariffs, it wasn't the invasion of Greenland potentially, but it was one thing that happened with this IT cybersecutor. When they made the arrest order against Netanyahu, Microsoft blocked his email address. And this was a wake-up call for European leaders and people who were in important charges to say like, hey, maybe it's time we take this digital sovereignty as a very important matter, because if someone is using this to weaponize what happens with us as a society and as governments, etc., this could be really, really damaging for us. Europe has tried this before. Yes, we try to kind of make an ecosystem that really belongs to Europe and that really stands by what the things that Europe stands for. So obviously the closest example is GDPR. I live in Germany, so everything there is GDPR. Basically, both GDPR and European Accessibility Act, they were strong economy makers, because a lot of products and a lot of companies started to emerge by having to comply with this, but it was different. This was regulation. It was not the same thing. What we're seeing now is that there's consumers, governments, and builders are choosing European alternatives because they want to, not because the law tells them that they have to. And some things started happening here. Some things like, for example, France ditching Zoom and Microsoft Teams in look for their own kind of platform with their database in Europe. Or, for example, the military in Austria stopping using Microsoft for an open source alternative. There's been more recent cases like this Danish app that went really viral, obviously after they were almost invaded. That basically checks whether a product that is in the supermarket or somewhere has any origins in the US, so that they can boycott it. And basically this is why we're here. I know it's cool to talk about AI, I know it's cool to talk about, what's changing, are you using Figma, are you using Cloud Code and all that kind of stuff. But from my perspective, as someone who works curating a conference and talks to a lot of people and kind of hears what the sentiment is in people in really large companies, I think this is a topic that potentially is more important at this point of the conversation about AI, because there's really a transformation that few people are knowing, and that will potentially change a lot of how European products are done. About me quickly, I already mentioned I curate Hatch Conference. I was a graphic designer turned UX designer. I started organizing community events, and one of those events turned out to be Hatch. It's 5 years old this year, it will be 5 years old this year, and it's an event that just summarizes 550 people, senior designers from Europe and people from all over the world. We have speakers from all over the world as well, but the focus is still very European. And what we try to say is like, hey, we understand there's all these very important companies and tools and things happening, but what are the problems that are actually important for today's designers in Europe? So let's go back to those things that blocked Europe from actually, having the possibility against what America is doing. Funding, the first one. So yes, the funding is still in the US, there's no question about that, but it's no longer as necessary, because as we see, costs for production, for building have dramatically decreased. Teams are getting leaner all over the world, and what happens is that a 5-person team here in Portugal can now build what a 50-person team used to be building in San Francisco. And obviously they also have that advantage, but that levels a little bit the playing field. The second thing is, and again playing field, is European models are coming across, and while we understand that again the leap of quality or the leap of possibilities is there's still a lot to catch up, there is a reality where we could see in the very near future a point where like a model from here, it's so good that it doesn't even make sense to get the extra good, because it's already doing most of the stuff we need it for. And the other big development is local models. There's been like this Qwen 3 released by Alibaba, which basically it's an LLM that runs into any normal machine and can run very smoothly with the capacity of something like Cloud Sonnet 4.5. And this is crazy because before you had to like spend a lot of money and obviously think of infrastructure that was like super powerful. And nowadays you can run this in your MacBook. Also very interesting, I actually saw this a few days ago and I decided to add it last minute. We in Europe are actually training all the LLMs. Our consumption of LLMs and our use of that is way higher than the US right now, which is crazy to think about, right? So they have their LLMs, but we are training them. But whatever this means, anyways, I think it's anyways a shift of if we're really this, adapting this is actually part of our everyday life and how we use this, this has to be also already a signal for something else. So the last but not least, and maybe the most fragile one, is talent. Why? Obviously, all these companies are still there, salaries are better, a lot of possibilities are there. But we know that the US has been pushing people away with all this regulation, from immigration, from very racist actions and comments. And a lot of people are really thinking twice before going to a place that's going to be mean to them. And on the other way around, a lot of people from the US are actually looking at other places to go live because they're not satisfied with how their situation is in their country. So this is probably the most fragile one, because for this to really work out, there still needs to be a lot of development in terms of making sure the far right doesn't win more elections, and that we still have governments and a society that really values immigration and that does things like European Research Fund, doubling the researchers' funding that they had, and all of these things that really help people from other countries move into Europe, as many of us have done. So these three things are shifting at the same time, and it's never happened before. So there is not a real path on knowing exactly what's going to happen with this. And this is a window, not a guarantee, right? This is signals that we're seeing and things that we see moving things in a different directions. And Europe isn't the products, right? It's the ecosystem. It's not selling Europe as a packaged product. It's really what are the values that are here, and the value that your data, your money, and your culture stays here, and that turns into a new competitive advantage. But as a designer, as a developer, whatever, why should you care? What is this important for you? Why are we talking about this in the first place? So I put together a set of learnings that I think comes from this, and we'll also talk about what this represents for your day-to-day work. The first one is, if there's going to come a time where there needs to be products that are locally made, we need those products to be made, right? So we need those teams and we need those companies that are going to be that next generation of local alternatives. This means that, in my vision, there will be the creation of a new economy, or a smaller, parallel economy. That doesn't mean that suddenly we all drop Microsoft Teams and we all go to the European alternative. No, but what I mean is, as GDPR did, as the European Accessibility Act kind of did, this opens a whole new possibility of people who not only want to stay compliant, but they want something that in the longer term they can do. So it's a much more sensible investment in a way. The second thing is, and we see this beyond the topic of the talk today, AI basically creates the same thing over and over, right? And us as designers, when we work in certain products that really needs to stand out, just to standardize and to use the output of those LLMs, or the output of what that idea of the design in Silicon Valley used to be, is no longer applicable, and people need new things. So what happens? Instead of having a portfolio that has to adapt to what Uber and what Facebook or whatever are looking, suddenly your local products and your products with own identity have a different meaning. And I think this is very powerful and a big possibility that's changed the mindset, right? Third one, research becomes a lot more valuable. When a lot of people are fearing, AI can replace research because it can do all this and that, I think there's something about how to plan and understand a locally sourced product that completely cannot be found in the LLM yet, at least, right? So there's something about researching how to create and how to test and how to create this idea or this product that really has a sense of resonating with an audience. Is something that will become a lot more important. Multilingual and multi-regulatory thinking becomes a design skill. So basically all that work around and all that, all those meetings and changes that we had to do to our product for compliancy, etc., really becomes something that makes us specifically and strategically much more valuable as someone that has to come from a different culture and just suddenly adapt to all these things. And as a kind of as a side effect of this as well, privacy and trust become design materials and not constraints, right? So this actually becomes a necessity for each product and something that is non-negotiable, not just because of the regulation, but because it's kind of the whole point of what we're doing this. Why you should care is because from now on, the vision for the product becomes a lot more important, right? You need to really think about the values of good product design going forward, and the existing ones are getting rejected. Because if there's a mandate or if there's an intention to actually change how we're doing things, we're not just going to default to how we were doing things before. So what is that vision? What does it look like? Back into the models, I already mentioned this a little bit, but I think beyond the compliancy and beyond the preference, there's something very important about those models, even if they're never catching up, just when they get to the point where they're good enough, I believe there will be a lot more of a case to choose these models, because that extra 10% that the other ones can do is a big liability. Another big consequence that is not fully related to the topic of this talk, but I think it's very important for us to understand, is that the diversification of tooling and diversification of the way we do things just makes it so that there won't be just one tool stack. I mean, developers have been doing this for a long time, but us designers, it felt like we always had, our processes and our tools, and this is what we should do. And today, I'm sure whenever you talk to the people in the audience, they'll all tell you that they're doing some things differently. Some have tried more things, some have tried other things, but we agree that it's never going to be anymore that this is a tool that you have to learn to work in design. There will just be like a set of tools and a set of processes that each company will have to put together. And a lot of them will involve products that are created specifically for that market or even internally in the company. Last but not least, and I think specifically in the case of us being in Portugal and having so much work that is outsourced, so many consultancies and stuff, and a lot of the brief coming from the US and from the Middle East, etc., I believe there will be a surge in all these briefs coming from Europe, because you will still, be in a country that heavily relies on being an outsourcing service for a lot of other countries, but instead of actually having to go to a place like India or a place like Pakistan, or etc., they will actually want to find the people who can both work on all these aspects that we talked before and are accessible to what they're looking for. So you're not competing with San Francisco anymore. This can also apply to China if you want. It's not specifically like an anti-American talk at all. What the whole point of this is that your knowledge, your cultural context, your understanding of how people actually live, pay, communicate, navigate bureaucracy, that's not a limitation. That's your advantage. Thank you very much. I do have one little plug to make. Since I am in Lisbon, besides organizing Hatch, I organize some design leadership events, design strategy events, and one of them happens here in Lisbon on April 22nd and 23rd, Palacio do Grilo, for those who live here and know it, beautiful venue. It's an event that is not a conference, it's a hands-on event, workshops with very important people from very interesting companies, some local, some international, that come to get you into a small room of people working on design strategy mostly. And we have about 5 tickets left at the moment, but if you're interested, you can get a 20% discount with this QR code. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. We're gonna have a bit of a discussion about this. They're gonna roast me about how everything I said is just not true.
Okay, so now we have a round table. It's going to take about 30 minutes. Some of my colleagues to stop us when it's time. And then we'll have 15 minutes for questions from the public, okay? So, thank you, Damián. Very thought-provocative. Let's, well, I'll start with a phrase I've been hearing a lot. I hear that Trump is making Europe great again. But the question is this really happening right now? Are we overreacting? Are we taking conclusions from the political geo scene? Or is this actually real? So let's talk about how this really happens in practice, okay? Or starts to happen. Okay. So, here I have a second guest, Isabel. Isabel Machado.
Almost everyone knows me, right?
Eh?
Almost everyone knows me.
Almost everybody knows you. Yeah, you are a very
Celebrity.
very popular guest, of course. So Isabel is a director of design of user-centered, which is in SaaS, working on privacy, content, and trust. I took it from the website, so it should be right. So you get to work a lot on product, on regulation, on UX. Your background, you came from other roles, but the previous one it was at Coffee Beans, a financial sector company. And more than that, you are a design leader that I deeply respect. You are really active in the community. You founded, well, Ladies at UX, right? And you're really strong on empathy, inclusion, and design for improving people's lives. So I was very honored for you to be here. Okay. And I'll also participate. I'll not put questions only. I'll bring what Ethan thinks about this. So the perspective of the agency of someone that sells our design services in different markets, but from Portugal. Okay. So question one: is this shift really real? Right? Damián brought to us a strong thesis. Europe is definitely in a new moment. We all know that. Is this really happening in digital products, or is it still early and this is something of a forecast? So Isabel, I'll start with you. Are you seeing some signs of this? Is this real? Do you believe in this?
I wouldn't say it's forecasts, I would say it's real, but I would also reinforce the concept that it's a window, that we don't know actually the forecast, but we know that right now we have the power to build in a different way. What we also know is that as European based, our culture is different. We have much stronger ethics, we have much stronger regulations, we are leading the regulations when it comes to AI, for instance. I'm working at User-Centrics. User-Centrics was born because it was a CMP, a Consent Management Platform. It was not born after the GDPR, it was born slightly before. And to the ones that only know GDPR by the boring thing that we need to do, basically it came because with Facebook, Meta, Instagram, all our data was suddenly very available and very easy to play from a marketeer perspective. So basically we were just abusing on our data as users. And suddenly Europe comes with GDPR and making regulations about how you should use the user data to have better performance results when you are pushing, selling, and those types of things. And for instance, what we are actually living right now is on the edge of the opportunity for something very similar. Because back then we had like, woohoo, data, and suddenly, okay, regulation, okay, all the CMPs and all the small companies that started building solutions for that opportunity suddenly increased, and that's why it's a scale up, and that nowadays User-Centrics has almost 400 people and not only 4. But it's exactly the same opportunity that we are living right now, for instance, with AI. Right now, we go to Instagram and we are not sure, is that real or is it AI? So we clearly have an opportunity to improve the digital experience that we are living, and clearly it's not solved yet. This is just to give an example of something that can come with a wave of AI regulation that is coming right now with the AI Act that Europe is working, and a lot of things are shifting, and also in terms of the independence of building, because just like Damián was saying, if months ago or years ago we were super dependent on the investments from the US or the funds that existed there, nowadays we have a lot of funds also happening here in Europe, so we have a very interesting opportunity, I would say.
Okay, let me give you my 5 cents on this. I'm not sure about building global products from Europe yet, but I know what other markets think of European design talent. which is a part of this, right? So, for instance, when we go to the Middle East and we say, hey, we work from Europe, we are a European design consultancy, what they think is, okay, if it comes from Europe, then it's sophisticated, and secondly, those guys understand multiculturalism. Maybe it's not obvious for them to design from left to right, okay, but they understand different countries, different nuances, and that's good. Okay, that's something that I feel. When I cross the Atlantic to the other side, to the US, it's not the same. It's not the same. So, well, yes, Europe talent is good. But what I have been hearing is that, well, Americans are very practical, right? So they talk to me like, okay, it's either you or from Latin America. Because, and a small note here, Mr. Trump is helping us a little bit because he posed this new $100 visa cost for new professionals going to work there. 100,000, yes, 100,000. So it's very expensive for them to get new high-grading professionals from abroad. So they have to contract offshore. They either go to Latin America or they come to us, or or they might go to Asia. When they compare us to Latin America, well, this is a little provocative, but what I hear is, well, I prefer Europe because I prefer the work culture in Europe. Okay, so working with European professionals, maybe I can trust more. Okay, so maybe, well, it's what I hear. And Africa, but Africa is easy because Europe is the role model for Africa. So whatever we do here is good. It's as simple as that. Okay, so but this is not the same as building actually global products from here. But it's an ingredient, right? So even inside Europe, we could be more united, you know. From me, from my perspective, selling design services from a southern country, I still need to fight a lot to build the trust, to make everybody understand that yes, we do understand different cultures, yes, we understand the languages, yes, we understand currencies, yes, we understand laws, well, different laws and so on. So yes, it's still a bit difficult, okay? But coming back to you, David, is this what you showed a dream? Well, not a dream for sure, but something you are envisioning early on, or do you already see actual signs?
A little bit of both. I think that there's definitely something shifting, but no one really can tell where it goes to. I think one of the also very important signs, I don't know if you guys have read, but today the first article about the EU was published. They haven't published the whole text yet of the draft, but basically it's a regulation that allows founders to create a company in all 27 European states at once in a sort of like a 28 regime, without any existing capital, without paying for a notary. And while there's still some criticism and it won't fully match what Delaware is from the United States, it's already a sign to just really want to attract people to come and build from here. So this is one of the many things, besides some of the ones that I mentioned, where I think like there is an intention for that to happen. Will it realize and will it be in a year? Probably not. But it's the start of the movement. And as Isabel was saying as well, all this part that comes with regulation, there still always was a lot more friction from the consumer. But when those two things come together, they go much faster.
Okay. Yeah, I see. And okay, let's dive into what this whole regulation thing means. And coming back to you again, Isabel, you work at User-Centrics. You guys work with regulation, with privacy, with data protection. You already talked a little bit about that. So is User-Centrics an example of Europe building strong digital capabilities, or is Europe creating the needs for them? You see, is
A mix of both, actually.
At the end, no?
But the best sentence it was from my previous CTO. He used to say that before he used to work in a company that everybody wanted, but nobody needed. And then he shifted into a company that nobody wanted, but everybody needed. And that's the reality that we are still facing. So right now we are still at the core, it's a CNP, and that's the core product that we have. But right now we are opening the peacock. We are opening the offering into a product suite around data privacy and around how can you improve the performance of marketeers without compromising the quality or the unnecessary data from users and anonymizing it and really shifting in terms of the offering that we have. I would say that when you have regulation, it still is a huge push because that's will lead you into forcing the needs that you have. But we are also seeing that there is a lot of opportunities, especially when it comes to marketeers and people working on performance online, and that needs to go with data, and then we go to AI, and it also goes with data. And there are a lot of workflows of the data that are still not fully mapped or protected. So again, if we design the ways that give the allowance to protect that, it can be connected into a family and a suite, an ecosystem at the end of the day that will offer more value. But in the end, I think it becomes more and more challenging to make sure that you have the revenue and the growth that you are looking for as a company. And that's something super interesting that Damián was sharing, is that the customer, the user research, like it's critical more and more because right now the building, the systems, like that's easy to accomplish with code or whatever tools that you are using. But the knowledge of what is the game changer on that group of people in life, that only comes with empathy. And that's what Europeans, again, I do believe are stronger than other continents. And if you look into service design, we are leading in terms of service design. And when it comes to ecosystems and interconnected delivery of products and experiences and support and a more human experience when it comes to the engagement of the brand that then will lead into a higher revenue, that comes with service design and that comes with your mindset.
I'm wondering when your clients come to you guys, do they come because they have to, or at least some start to come because they really want to?
The big majority, because they have
They have to.
But in the US, for instance, we are also expanding more and more into the US. And in the US, the legislation is much different than ours in Europe. So there, in some cases, it still is mostly because they have to. Some of them, they also have interests in terms of optimizing their performance with optimized ways of getting the data and third parties and first parties.
It's really interesting that change, because I can share what we have been seeing in terms of accessibility, right? So Europe, as we all know, imposed the Europe Accessibility Act last June, right? So many of us have been working on that. And we, as a services provider, we have been working a lot on accessibility. And I really see a shift. First, before June 2025, everybody came to us saying, hey, what is this? How much will I be fined if I don't do it? And how much does it cost? So I have to do it, right? So, but now it's quite interesting, because we as a consultancy, we discussed, are we going to have business after June 25? And we do a lot, much more now. Why? Well, of course, because people still have to, but we see a shift, because now companies understand, and it's not negotiable for them to do not have accessibility, even if they are late to actually comply. So even this morning we were discussing with a client, and it's really interesting because I think it has to do with not only with the very important but not very large blind community, right? So it's not only with that and screen readers and so on and so on. It has to do with an aging population. It has to do with our parents, right? So I think that I see that accessibility now is becoming the DNA of companies and not only something that they have to do. Okay, so there's a little shift.
I want to add to that as well. That, for example, we had. I think when both the consumer intention is there and the funding is there, everything else just like the bridge built itself, right? Like I think that's a key thing. And we have, for example, in a very small scale, right? But like last year at Hatch, we had a sponsor called Fable, and they are an accessibility tool for research, and they're based in Canada. And they came and they were. And I was like, why do you want to sponsor a conference in Europe? And they're like, because Europe is paying attention to accessibility, and the US doesn't really care. So we're actually opening offices in London. We're actually investing in all these events. We're actually doing all that stuff. And that creates, like, when there's that intention and that investment, everything else kind of like happens around it. How long does it take?
But apart from accessibility, Damián, do you see this transformation in other areas? This transformation from compliance into actual value?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's proven that accessible design is good design, that products that are accessible drive better business and have better retention, like all of these things are there. But I understand also when you have to do something because your mom tells you to do it, you don't really want to do it. But once you actually learn that what you're doing is good for you or you're enjoying it, it creates a very different dynamic. And there's entire companies, something like Lovable, for example, who decides to stay in Europe and brings the engineers from Seattle to Europe, from California to Europe, to live in Stockholm, because they're like, we do not want to go there, and we know there's a hustle to go through all of these things, but we're staying here, and that's the same thing.
Okay. Let's talk about local versus global. You mentioned it in your presentation. What I see is that maybe it's like this. Usually we got these products from the US that were made global first, right? So the US is used to making products global. Maybe they localize them, but it's usually a very surface localization, right? So, for instance, in many American products, I still struggle to get a proper VAT invoice. So yes, they sometimes do it, but in a very narrow, distant place that I never find. It's always like that, okay? So that's just an example. But if we try to do it the other way around, I mean, let's build it locally for Luxembourg, okay? Deeply inside Luxembourgian culture. Then it gets really difficult to scale. My question is, maybe the real value is on the way you build it, right? So maybe what we're looking at is how to build products multi-locally, right? So maybe the value is to have designers that understand that adaptation and localization in the sense of culture is a feature that is embedded in the first design of the product, and then it gets easy to go deeper on actual localization. So, what do you guys think on this?
I think even when you try to put Europe in the same bag, we obviously are, tons of countries with very different history, very different cultures. Some who joined the European Union very early on, some who joined a lot later. So it's not like we can really create a homogeneous European society. But I still do believe that there's been work done from Europe to kind of try to not say like, let's make this flat and homogeneous, but actually let's allow everyone to have an experience where they can actually appreciate the difference in all the other cultures. And I think one of the very simple examples of this is the whole Erasmus program. All the countries in Europe hated each other after the war. And and European leaders thought like, what can we do about it? And it's like, let's actually send people to go to a strange country, to a place where they don't speak the language and see how things are. And after 35 years, then suddenly they'll kind of accept and embrace, that we are a multicultural society and stuff like that. So I think back to your question a little bit, I think local first does not mean specifically tailored for a very narrow kind of cultural set of people. It just means more of on the value. And I think over there we can go above the cultural differences for each country.
And any thoughts on this as well?
No, the first thought is the global, that it's also
global,
something
yeah.
that it's growing, but I do think it's something that shifts in that direction. But the biggest challenge that I have in terms of foreseeing what's coming next, it's connected to this AI hype that we are living. But with that, everyone can build. So I have a big question mark. What is the future of SaaS? Like software as a service, like the revenue that comes from that software, it's because multiple companies or multiple people or multiple customers are actually buying our products. But right now, if you are building the same product that I am selling, maybe you are not buying my product. So this is the biggest problem we have right now with the new way of building. But then again, it comes with a lot of regulation, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of integrations. And this is the game changer, that you cannot just jump into cloud code and build all these infrastructures. But again, this is something that we now have. And actually that's something that is changing my business core, for instance, because we still rely a lot in the consent management. Right now, Europe is deciding on the new laws that will redefine the way we are collecting consent. And imagine if nowadays, who loves a good cookie banner? Nobody, right? But right now we are shifting on the way we are collecting the consent, and eventually it will not rely on each individual website, and it will come at an upper level, because guess what? No one is really reading their consent, their data and their rights, and what are they giving. So if that's the fact, let's maybe put it in one place where they will read and interact, and we will have more macro effect. But again, this is something that is coming from regulation, from evolution, and guess what? It's also connected to the fact that we need to develop our European models, because for that we also need to have more data, and for that we need to make it flow a little bit.
I think if I can add something to that, one important thing is we as builders, quote unquote, we need to understand the products as something that exceeds beyond, the software that we're seeing, the interface that we're interacting with. I think there's something about really the level of trust and the level of things like customer support or things like this that can really make a difference. I'll give you a very simple example. I use this tool called Excel Events for the online conference, right? So every year until last year, paid about 2,000 euros, and this kind of like sorts like the streaming and the chat and all this kind of stuff. I send people there, they get tickets, very easy. This year I was like, you know what? I'll just build it myself. Like, why am I paying 2,000 euros to these guys in wherever they are, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I can just build it myself. And then I was thinking like, well, wait. Like, what if it breaks? What if like the stream stops working? What if the chat doesn't work? What if something is wrong? Like, and I can just call, like, they have the most amazing customer support ever. And to me, it's like, okay, wait, no, actually it's working. So if your product is just what you can click on and print, you're probably a little screwed. But if your product really comes with a comprehensive experience for the user, then I don't think the cloud code are concerned in its position.
Okay, great. I think we will be coming short on time, but two quick questions. First, so in Europe, we are good at trust, privacy, ethics in design. Is this a real strength? Do we see this as an advantage, or is it just something that we are obliged to understand, but it's not something that is actually valuable?
I do see it. I do think you see it, and I do think Damián sees it. And I think the question is, do you all see it and do you all feel it? Because right now we have the power in our hands to build what matters, and we also have the curiosity and the interest and the human-centered drive to go after what will make a difference, what will generate a positive impact in the world. And I guess that's the shift. Like, why are we building for? Is it just to get rich or to have a positive impact? Because in the end of the day, if we are building something that will add value to other people's life, that maybe will lead to the money and not the other way around.
Yeah. I also think when you don't see it and the French government comes and say, Ande, I have $1 billion. If you're secure, if you're compliant and whatever, you're going to start seeing it.
Yes, I think that, our clients don't buy ethics for itself, but they buy business impact. So many times it has to do with us showing the business impact. That's the point. Okay, last question. We have an audience of designers. Many people here working in strong design teams. What should they do differently tomorrow?
Start building. Because like all the innovation is like 90% failure, 10% success. So you just need to build, explore, test, fail fast, learn fast, and you need to try it around. Because if you are not building, don't wait for someone to tell you to do something. It's like, do you want to follow or do you want to lead? And if you have the power to lead, why not do something that it's meaning, at least for you, for your family, for someone. The other day I was looking into an amazing example from a European designer, actually. I think it was a competition, a European competition. And basically she was sick with a feeling, like, not sick with it, but well, you see, like her grandmother was constantly being assaulted with like stalking and people doing scams and selling her things. So she built an app that was basically doing the scanning of what were the messages, what were the callings that she was receiving, and it was supporting her grandmother and hopefully thousands of people that really need this, including myself. Didn't pay the €1,000 for something, but who knows, today or tomorrow, right? But again, it was something that she was really feeling, and it was human-driven, and she built it. So if you have a problem in your life, transform it into a
With your own hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it also comes with getting out of your laptop, and if you're building, like build it in the context and, you know, interact with the rest of the things and understand things like economics and politics and how all of it affects, because then when people get laid off and then they kind of like, oh, you know, I lost my job, I blame the tech industry or whatever, and like to understand where that comes from really takes knowing a little bit beyond that. And obviously come to Hash Conference.
I can't work at that, of course.
Yes.
Design movement center.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the questions of the audience. I imagine that there might be some. Who wants to go first? You didn't plan hanging here.
Thank you. Hard to be the Hermione Granger here and just raise my hand like I have their turn later. Yeah, again, thanks for this. It's interesting to see how regulation plays a big role in here. I just arrived. It's my first month in Lisbon. I'm from Brazil. Yeah, Brazilian folks. And one thing that I was going to comment and then raise a question is I worked a lot with accessibility checks. I worked with LinkedIn in the past doing like a whole accessibility check of one of their platforms. And at the end, it just like threw away the whole project and didn't spend any money on it because it wasn't a lot regulated in the US. And although it's a bit frustrating, it's also like an interesting learning because I had to read the whole WCAG documentation and went through all of it and do all the courses and, you know, learn all of it. And now I see, and I'm building a lot of tools that do that automatically with, you know, Claude or with any LLM. And I feel that, like, when I look at it, that other designers won't have the opportunity to learn the regulation itself, like to actually read through it and do accessibility checks and do usability checks, even others like sustainability checks. And I wanted to know from you, how do you think that's going to impact the industry? Because people are not learning from doing, like there's an AI doing that for them, and they just receive a report with 154 issues on the website, and you can click a button and fix all of the issues with, again, an agent. So how does that impact the designers and how, you know, they learn about regulations? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's not easy. Obviously, Isa will have a lot more to say about this. But my opinion is like you also have like I know in these times we're forced to believe that we're supposed to do everything. We're supposed to be like PMs and researchers and designers and developers and regulation experts and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's true. I think we need to rely on how other people that know their expertise work on, value that, and try to collaborate as much as possible.
Say that I don't. I don't really have like an answer, but I feel the same you are saying, especially when it comes to research, because it's very easy to go into, okay, we have all this data, all these customer reviews, all these surveys, all these customer support tickets, feed it to AI, oh, here you go, the opportunities. And suddenly you don't empathize with the real need, right? If you only do it like that. So my personal opinion is to do AI powered, AI enhanced, but still have the human connection and some digestion of the pain point. When it comes to accessibility, we did an amazing collaboration actually with iPhone, doing like in-person tests of the website and really taking people that have different levels of visual levels of needs, special needs. And that really, and it wasn't only designers, it was also the developers that have like actually Anderson is there. And it was also participating, but like especially involving the different people that are participating in the needs that need to be done, especially in your case in accessibility. If they see people struggling with it, then they will digest the AI summaries better. But I would keep on doing maybe less, but keep on doing it. So that's what moves.
I'll add something. Even this morning, I was talking with our clients on this. There's two approaches to accessibility, for instance. One is to avoid fines, right? So, and that question was quite real. They had 80-something% of non-compliance, okay? And their question is, where do I start? How much do I have to spend to have maximum impact on this number you presented to us? And my answer to them was, okay, that's one option, but you have another one. You have a strategic option because your brand maybe is not taking full advantage of what it means to become accessible. Okay, so for instance, I already mentioned the aging population, right? So I deeply feel that there's a huge undervalued opportunity of working for people that have very good buying power, but are old, okay? Building very simple, shrunk down applications in terms of features, but easy to use, okay? And it's more than that, it's more than aging population. It's, for instance, becoming inclusive for everybody and communicating. Because what I see is that some of my clients become inclusive, they check the box and carry on. They forget to transform their communication, their strategy to say, hey, we are an inclusive brand. We are now an inclusive brand. If you broke your arm, if you're a mother, if you are blind, if you're getting old, we have touch points for you. Okay, that's what I think.
Hello, Miroslav here, user experience researcher. Thank you very much for your lovely talk. I really enjoyed it. I have two reflections. First of all, I want to say a few words about the rising number of European-based products. And second of all, I would like to hear your opinion about how the AI transforms the product teams. So the first thing I wanted to reflect on is that in the past year, I've been working with more than 10 independent developers that are developing open source products, although some of the products might be switched to more commercial use. I've seen that there are a lot of products for the general user. Think about navigation apps, even applications for the growing population. We should not only talk about aging population, but also for kids. They still need to learn digital literacy, and Yeah, there's also funding available through the European Union. You can find it through NLNet and also Commons caretakers. My second question would be, how do you see products team being affected by the introduction of AI, particularly shifting the load from designers to developers more often? Because in the past, we used to work with frameworks like Damián, but now I see that maybe developers have more strain and pressure to produce more and more and more, while design maybe research is being scattered around. Like, okay, how do you see this happening maybe in Europe, European context? Thank you.
So to start, you should share the list of funds and to give some motivation to everyone. And so what I see in terms of shifting is that the role will not be so defined as they were, which is good and bad. So it's more and more blended. Suddenly you are also PM, suddenly you are also partially developer, and the developer is also partially designer, and the PM. So all this becomes much more blended than it was before. But before it also created some silos, so it also creates more opportunities of collaboration. But again, we also know that from the human race, we have huge challenges in terms of communication, and collaboration needs to happen with communication. So it's still not smooth as it can be, I would say. When it comes to if we are still designing and developing with the double diamonds, well, at least we are in my company. But what I do see is in terms of the cycles that it's happening, it's not only the developers that are being pushed to develop more and more and more. Designers are also being pushed to design more and more and more. Like everyone is being pushed to fast, fast, fast. And suddenly, sometimes you just need to go into the ocean and forget its craziness, because there is life beyond tech. But when it comes to the double diamonds, you should still do it. Like the other day we were having like a mini argument in terms of, okay, so we are now just doing cloud code prototypes, and what happens to the low fidelity napkin sketches? Like, okay, you can still do like a napkin sketch if it's helping the discussion. But were you doing the low fidelity prototypes? It was to put the less investment possible and have the fastest outcome, to put it the fastest possible in someone's hands to get feedback and then to iterate. So you should still do the same principle, which is keep the human in the loop from the moment where you are discovering their needs and opportunities and expectations, and then designing something. Now maybe it's no longer a low fidelity, it's lovable, cloud code, whatever. And then the thing is, you should not look at it as done. It's just like, it was the same problem already, like a lot of PMs were done. No, it's never done. It's continuous improvement, continuous discovery. You need to validate it. The reason why you are doing it is to get feedback and improve. And that should not change, I would say.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Martha. I have a simple question because all of you have a community background. So go ahead. My question is quite simple. What is your advice for building things community-based? In my case, I build SaaS software for a living, but I'm also a community builder. I'm working with Malik, I think you're friends with him, in Visual UX, and we're doing the job work, for example, together. So we're doing the local thing of putting design talent out there, or trying to. And my advice, or actually my question is, what advice would you have to do things for the community, by the community, and what kind of teachings have you had?
I mean, to me, anything that comes out to be interesting, it has to have a few pair of people working on it. I believe that yes, now we can in our bedroom build the most amazing replica of whatever software we want, but it kind of stays in that bubble. I think community is super important. I think community is super important to actually not stay in your head so much. Like when I started the conference, it was just me kind of like thinking what should be in there and trying to guess, or talking to some people and deciding myself. Now I have a network of like 10 people that I consult, every week, and that completely changes the outcome of what you do. So I think involve the people in whatever you're doing, whatever you're building, and you always get a better result.
And I would add workshops to suffer together. So I didn't play the terminal for 8 years, and it was the only time I played with the terminal. And now I did like a workshop one day, and I was super empowered. But then we had all different levels. So I grabbed the team, we locked the room, and we went into a room to suffer together until we all had the whole configurations, all the MCPs, and we were like, it's okay to fail, it's okay to don't understand nothing like this. Like, this is not done for designers, but like community building in this moment, I would say it's critical with workshops and conferences, but maybe like just informal gatherings, like let's all just learn the skills. And okay, you are more advanced, you are less advanced, let's create groups, and let's create like mini hackathons of community building stuff. I think that's a huge opportunity.
Okay, guys, I think we are out of time, but we're going to be still around. So please take the opportunity to meet people. We'll be around. We still have beer, we still have some bits and bytes. And I would like to thank you, Isabel, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Damián.